If you don't agree that Ian Hawke is the greatest villain in cinematic history, then
I swear to God, I will dice you into a million little pieces and put those pieces in a box. A glass box that I will display on my mantle.
When I pose the question to you, who's the greatest villain in cinematic history? You may respond with answers such as Darth Vader, Voldemort, or even Abby Lee Miller. However, you're all wrong. All of those answers are complete trash, and that is because the greatest villain in cinematic history is indeed Ian Hawke from the Alvin and the Chipmunks cinematic universe. And not only is he the greatest villain of all time, but he's also just the greatest character in general. Like, he is a god and he is a king. And in this video, I will be explaining why this is 1000% true, and anybody that disagrees can just
get the frick out of here! Get the frick out of here! Get the frick out!
Now, for those of you who are unaware of Ian Hawke, or in other words, uneducated and simply uncultured, I will explain who Ian Hawke is and what his beef is, really, what his deal is, if you will. Now, Ian Hawke was the villain in the first 3 live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, and his Joker backstory was that before meeting the Chipmunks, he was this rich music producer who was then snaked by those goddamn rodents twice. They snaked him twice, which then led him into some horrible situations. He ended up living in poverty for a while, he was living in the trash, he was eating trash for a while, living in filth and squalor, but he was also forced to become a furry, which is the most devastating thing to ever happen to a person. So you can understand his pain is pretty deep, right? Like, this man has a lot of baggage. Now, as mentioned before, he only appears in the first 3 live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, although there are 4. He doesn't actually appear in the final movie, nor is he even like referenced to or referred to like at all, which is, by the way, very strange considering he was like a huge part of the first 3 movies. Now, the fact that Ian isn't actually in the final movie can actually be linked back to the fact that the actor who plays Ian, who is my idol, David Cross, was actually treated really poorly by the team on the film.
Characters only, literally only as scripted, only in a pelican costume, or whatever the costume is. I'm like, well, clearly I don't have to go on the cruise ship. I can fly back to London and,
somebody else can be in the pelican costume.
Yeah. And then the woman's like, I remember calling her, like, begging, pleading, Karen, please. Like, no, you're in the cover set. I'm like, look, and then she said you have a distinctive walk.
Despite the fact that he was only in 3 of the 4 movies, though, Ian Hawke is the most memorable character of all of the movies, even the one that he isn't even in, because he's that powerful and that iconic. Now that we know a little bit more about this absolute king, I think it's time that we get into my very well thought out points as to why this man right here, is the greatest villain and also the greatest character in cinematic history. Now, in some stories, in some like movies and TV shows and stuff like that, the villains' reasons for being evil, or the reasons why that they are like so angry at the protagonist, is often not really justified. Like, don't get me wrong, a lot of the times it is, right, but you get those instances where it's not really justified. However, Ian Hawke's motives for why he is so evil in all of these movies are completely justified in my eyes. In the first movie, Ian is seen to be this rich record label king, this god of the music world, if you will. He then gives the Chipmunks the chance to be stars. He reaches his hand out to them and offers them the chance of a lifetime, which is what, by the way, they and Dave both wanted. Ian gives them a taste of the sweet life, giving them everything they could possibly ever want, and even takes them in as basically his own family. He even becomes their Uncle Ian. Like, the Chipmunks are like family to Ian at this point, right? And like, you can tell that Ian is starting to develop like a wee soft spot for them. Also, I'd like to point out the fact that Ian is just doing his job as well. Like, his job is to get them to be popular. Like, his job is to promote their music and stuff, and that's exactly what he did. He made them like mega superstars, and the fact that he's just completely erased from the Chipmunks' success is like completely ridiculous, because he's the reason that they're stars, and the fact that Dave wants to take all the credit is just absolutely ridiculous in my eyes. And this is why Dave is also a humongous snake.
We're gonna beat your ass! You just get that through your stinking traitorous head!
The Chipmunks obviously have a little change of heart and decide that they don't want anything to do with Ian anymore. However, instead of doing the nice and noble thing, they just snake and leave him high and dry. And this causes Ian to get fired, which in turn leads to him losing all of his money, his house, his job, and the respect of his peers. No one takes him seriously anymore. Now, this absolutely crushes Ian, which leads him to a state of depression where he is literally living in filth and squalor, eating trash.
Look at me! I lost everything. Except for my dignity. They can't take that away from me. And it's all because of them.
which is where we go into the second movie. Now, in the second movie, we see that Ian, since being snaked by those goddamn rodents, has been forced to live in poverty. Like, the man's just straight up homeless. He's literally eating trash. Like, someone send this man some help, my god. However, he's given another chance when he meets the Chipettes. Now, Ian does the same thing for the Chipettes despite being homeless, right? So you need to keep in mind, right, this man has no home. This man has, like, no food. He doesn't eat. It doesn't seem like he has a bed or anything. Like, he just kind of, like, hangs about in the trash. So the fact that he got the Chipettes to be so successful the way that he did, even though he was homeless and gone through a really hard time, really says a lot about his determination to get back at the Chipmunks. And I think that is justified completely because of the way that the Chipmunks treated him. Ian takes the Chipettes in and helps them to become stars. He even enrolls them in school. Like, he obviously cares about them. Again, this could also be linked back to the fact that he does just want revenge on the Chipmunks. But how would he know that the Chipmunks are in school? Like, he obviously just enrolled the Chipettes into school because he wanted to help them. And I think that's pretty wholesome of him. However, the Chipettes begin to see the reality of Hollywood and decide to, as the Chipmunks once did, to snake my guy Ian. However, they are helped by the Chipmunks, so Ian is faced yet again with the pain of being done over by these goddamn rodents. He is ruined for a second time. So I think if you look at all of the things that the Chipmunks have actually done to Ian, that Ian's anger towards them and Ian's, like, the fact that he just wants to get his revenge on them is completely justified in my opinion. His motives are completely justified. These hools have done him over so many times and they get away with it every time, and they seem to be like the stars, and they are the good guys. They are the heroes of the story, when Ian is done over time after time.
You dishonorable, cowardly pieces of garbage.
And this is his Joker backstory. This is where he begins to get really, really pissed off. Because do you blame him? Like, if you were forced to live in filth and squalor after once being the most famous man in the music industry, you would be pissed off as well. However, in the final movie that he appears in, it's shown that Ian has been left to become one of the most horrific things that a human is forced to become from the pain that they have suffered. And that, my good sir, is a furry. Now, if this isn't the biggest justification for his hatred towards the Chipmunks, then I don't know what is. Now, in the third movie, he does actually turn a wee leaf and does become a good guy. Like, he does save Dave from, like, falling to his death. However, if Ian decided to stay evil, I don't think anyone could blame him. Like, he's literally, like, been snaked by these people and these rodents for so long. Like, the way that the Chipmunks, the Chipettes, and even Dave treated him for just doing his job is complete justification for the reason why he became such a salty hole, and I do not blame him one bit. Ian isn't powerful in the physical sense. Although he is a god in my eyes, he doesn't have magical abilities or super strength. So how is he powerful, you may be asking? His power is his mind. Now hear me out, right? Like, I know you're punching the screen and, like, telling me to shut up, right? But just hear me out, right? He is put through the worst situations that a human can probably go through, right? Poverty, homelessness, living in filth and squalor, becoming a furry, and he always finds a way to stay on top, right? Although he is brought down by the end of the first two movies, he found a way to come back from the bottom in both the second and the third movie. The fact that he is mentally powerful enough to go through all of that stuff and still come back on top is incredible. Dare I say, godlike behaviour? It could be argued the fact that he also was able to create two hugely successful groups, one after he was basically cancelled, is such a powerful thing within itself as well. He's so powerful that he got himself out of the slums and essentially created another powerhouse as if it was that easy. He is an absolute king, and that is why the Chipmunks and the Chipettes and Dave are so incredibly intimidated by him, because they know that he is so powerful that if he really wanted to, he could take them all down. He's just waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Now, if we look at Alvin and the Chipmunks as just one continuous story, like the Alvin and the Chipmunks cinematic universe is just one continuous story, Ian basically won, right? If you look at villains in general, they don't ever really get what they want in the end, but Ian did. Ian got what he wanted. By the end of the third movie, Ian sold the story of the lady who was pretending to be Tom Hanks in the third movie to Hollywood and got many bids on it, and this would have resulted in him getting a lot of money. So he basically won. He got all his money back. So, like, he won. The villain won the story. Now, it could be argued that he did change his ways and did become a good guy. However, I'd like to argue the fact that he actually acted like he changed doesn't necessarily mean that he did. Like, he could have saved Dave so that he could just continue to bully him and flaunt his wealth to him. Like, we don't know what goes on inside this king's mind. However, what we do know is he was still able to be the villain through all of the stories and still got what he wanted in the end. That is such king behaviour. Like, the fact that the villain of the story, the villain of the first 2 movies, got what he wanted at the end of the movie. He is an icon. Now, I think the greatest mark of a truly great villain is the entrance. You need to have an iconic entrance in order to be considered to be the greatest villain of all time, of course. And you may be wondering, does Ian have a great entrance? If you've seen Alvin and the Chipmunks, then you know exactly where this point is going. I'd say all of Ian's entrances into the movies are pretty iconic, right? However, nothing will ever beat his entrance in the 3rd movie. Now, the reason why this is the most iconic is because of the way that this is set up, right? Now, basically, in the 3rd movie, the Chipmunks are on a cruise ship and they're just kind of thrashing about the cruise ship and stuff and annoying everybody. However, in the background, you can see this mascot, or this furry costume, if you will, in the background of all the scenes, right? As the Chipmunks are kind of just getting up to all sorts of shenanigans, there's this mascot kind of just following them about and just kind of lurking in the background. However, as the movie progresses, we are made to notice this mascot more and more. However, we don't suspect that it is in fact anyone that we know. We don't really know why. We're just assuming that he's just there for the kids, you know. We don't really understand who he is or what his motives are, you know what I mean? However, after an incident with some good soup, Dave goes to confront this mascot and it is revealed to be the one and only, our Lord and Saviour, Ian Hawke. I just got the chills, like just thinking about that scene. Now, I don't think there is a villain entrance as iconic as this. Like, Jesus Christ, just look at it. It is so beautifully done, beautifully shot. It is such a dramatic moment, and I think it's made to be so dramatic because of everything that this man, this king has been through. Like, if you look in his eyes, you can see the pain of being a furry. You can see the pain that he felt when he was living in filth and squalor, and every day when he has to get up at 6 in the morning, he put that furry costume on. You can see the pain in his eyes. It is just a breathtaking scene. He's mastered the villain entrance. And when he entered, you knew that the villain had arrived. You know, everyone was intimidated, everyone was scared. The Chipmunks were shaking and crying violently. Everyone was scared that Ian had arrived on this boat. The final live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks movie was released all the way back in 2015 and brought great pain and great sadness among the planet and among our society. This is because we were greeted with the fact that Ian Hawke, our idol, was nowhere to be seen. Although Tony Hale did an excellent job as the new villain in the movie, there was just a piece of our hearts that was missing in the viewing experience. That's because the movie didn't even mention anything about Ian, like not even like a card or a phone call or nothing of the sort, which is such a shame. It was also like the biggest elephant in the room, and the fact that it wasn't even mentioned was just really confusing. Like, where was he? Like, where did they go? Did they just go to Hollywood and nobody ever heard from him again? Like, that just seems really bizarre. Maybe they did mention it and I'm just like overreacting, right? But I am not watching that pit of despair ever again. Like, I swear to God, no. I'll be watching whenever Ian returns. Now, as I said, Tony Hale did a good job with being the villain in this movie, but Ian Hawke is such an iconic character that it really just left us with this feeling of something being missing. And I think the fact that this movie was very poorly received proves that Ian's presence was indeed missed throughout this movie, proving my point again why he is not only the greatest villain, but the greatest character of all time. Now, I'd like to finish this by saying that Ian Hawke was put through so much pain, so much embarrassment, and was still able to win in the end. He got exactly what he wanted, exactly what he deserved, and he didn't even need to change that much. He didn't let the fact that he was beaten twice by those rodents destroy him. He indeed rose above it all, and in the end won and got exactly what he deserved, which is why he is indeed the greatest villain and also the greatest character in all of cinematic history.
I have a little message to
Dave and the Chipmunks.
Do you want to know what I think of
Dave and the Chipmunks.
Well, I'll tell you what I think of
Dave and the Chipmunks.
This is what I think of
Dave and the Chipmunks.